what I'm going to share. You don't have to see my horrible desktop. Woohoo! Welcome everyone to Legs and Heads of a Good Brew. This is actually one of my favorite ones that I like to do. And it was the one, yes, thank you, start from that current slide. This is the one that started all of the whole series. I've been teaching this class for about 4 or 5 years. Oh, maybe longer than that, don't count. And it's, like I said, it's one of my favorites. So I'm gonna go ahead and jump in. You guys have both been on my classes before, but for those who haven't, if they have a tendency to drop in, you will want to have a can or bottle of a cider or beer. Normally works best for this. You can also do a wine or a mead. If you see me adjust my screen, I'm not adjusting you, I'm adjusting my screen because it keeps on whiting out. Preferably a pen or a paper or a notebook, because we are going to do a little bit of note taking like we did last time. A clear shot glass or a pint glass to practice with, and a glass of water, because we are all about hydrating. Not just hydrating with alcohol, but hydrating in general. I promise I will not go over this class, but because of that, I am going to ask that if you have any questions, to please go ahead and utilize the chat. Hopefully towards the end, we'll be able to answer some of those questions. Sometimes Oswin will go ahead and interrupt me to ask me those questions, which is totally okay. Otherwise, if something happens and we don't get to all those questions, I promise I will go ahead and I will answer them afterwards. I'm actually pretty good about that. Part of our housekeeping, what we're going to be covering. So I'm not going to cover any of the stuff that we went over last time, except for one small portion, but it will not be repeating myself. It will be adding on to it. We're going to go over some of the common definitions that you hear a lot when it comes to beverages. And I have a short little story to tell before we jump into that. We're going to talk about the anatomy of a drink. We're going to hit beers, ciders, and wine and or mead tonight. We are going to talk a little bit about off odors, as well as the taste appropriate to the type. We're actually going to talk a lot about the taste appropriate to the type. Just as a reminder, there is a previous class to this. It was called How to Drink. It is available on the Rum YouTube page, and we will link that on the Drunken Duck Facebook page tomorrow as well. And then coming up next week, I think next Tuesday, is Taste of Division 5. And that's when we get all the technical, if you want to enter or if you want to judge. It's a great walkthrough of terminology for entrants and judges. So before we go into this, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen for a second so you guys can see me, because I'm going to tell a cute little story as I adjust my screen. There we go. So I entered Division 5, more years ago than I kind of want to count. And I entered in 5 different beverages. Okay, I'm going to pause you guys for 1 second, just because, there we go. There we go. Hopefully now my screen will stop flickering. Yay. So it was about, now I have to go back. It was probably closer to 7 or 8 years ago. I entered Division 5, and I entered Division 5 with 5 different entries in order to try to get a divisional, which I did end up getting a first place in every one of them. Unfortunately, while I was doing that, I actually had to stop one of my entries because none of the judges knew the terminology in order to judge the categories. And this included not knowing what legs were, not knowing what the sugar content was, and stuff like that. So I actually physically stopped being an entrant for a little bit, and I went through and I started to talk about what each of these different things mean. And this is kind of the reason why I now teach this class, is because there's a lot of misconceptions when it comes to judging homebrews specifically for historical beverages. And so I wanted to go ahead and give both entrances and judges a better opportunity to kind of know what it was. So I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again, so you don't have to see my cat behind me. That was Nick's, by the way. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to jump in. Go. Next slide. So all of these common definitions that we're going to hit, they're either going to go underneath look, smell, feel, or taste. Now, if you guys were in the last class, or if you go back and you watch the video on the last class, you're going to notice a theme. These were the same ones that we hit a lot on in the last class looking at the adjectives. There's a reason I did the last class first. So we're going to look at look. Now, I'm going to give you a heads up to begin with. You are going to notice that I use some of these terminologies go into more than one category. That was actually done on purpose. So when you hear on the look of a beverage, and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pour myself a little bit of a beverage. This is one I'm going to use as an example later on. This is a Licorice Mead. It is a few years old, and it was opened already. This is the whole reason I'm actually using this. Otherwise, I would save this particular bottle of mead because it was not mine. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to pour some into a little sample glass so you guys can look at this with me, so you can kind of understand what I'm talking about. And I'll have another example of a beer a little bit later on as well. So we're looking at clarity, first of all. It's the quality of being clear. Now, when you're drinking a homebrew, especially in the SCA, if it is not clear, that's okay. It does not mean it's bad. In fact, a lot of times that there's some of the beverages, especially having to do with Hefeweizens or farmhouse ales that are supposed to be hazy. You want to go ahead and just remember that their level of clarity and our level of clarity in the modern day palate is going to be a little different. Now, if you're judging something in A&S, or if you're judging someone or your own particular brew, which is I hope a lot of people use this class for, you do want to go ahead and look for clarity. You want to look for lack of sediment. And sediment is any of the little dissolvey things that might be on the bottom of the glass. You want to go ahead and look for that in your glass and in your bottle. You also want to go ahead and look at the color. This is going to be the pigmentation of the liquid within the brew. Now, this is going to make a bigger difference when it comes to beer and wines than it's going to be over meads and ciders. Now, a head quality, this is one of my favorites, is not going to be found in what I poured in the mead. It's not going to be found in cider or wine. If there is a head on wine, there's probably a problem. Head quality is the foam that is on top when you pour a beverage. So in a bit, I'm actually going to go ahead and when we hit the beers and stuff like that, I'll minimize my PowerPoint so that way you guys can see this as well. Now, lacing is a cool one. Lacing is the pattern left behind when the head slowly goes down. So when you pour a perfect pint of Guinness, the joke is you're supposed to be able to make a nice little happy face in the Guinness. And as you drink that beer down, you're supposed to be able to watch that smiley face smile at you all the way till it gets to the end. A lot of times that doesn't happen, mostly because a lot of the bartenders don't know how to pour that perfect pint of Guinness. However, if you have something that's not a stout, that isn't going to keep that head all the way to the bottom, as your head goes down, what you see, that pattern of the foam around the edges of the glasses, that's going to be your lacing. And that's slightly different than your legs. You should not be you should always have lacing in beer, but you should have legs in cider, in cordials, in meads, and wine. Legs are, if you ever see those movies where you have someone tasting their wine and they swirl it and they look at it, what they're looking for is they're looking for the liquid to attach the top of your glass. And then as it comes down, it's going to bring little, almost like spider webs down with it. And how quickly that moves down or how much it sticks to the glass is going to tell you how much sugar is in there. If it sticks to that side of the glass and it's really slow moving and it's those legs are staying, that means you have a higher sugar content. That means that sugar is staying to the side of the glass. If it goes down right quickly, more like a cider, more like a water, that means that you're going to have a drier beverage. It's not going to have as much sugar content in it. Just like in the last class, you want to go ahead and you want to smell it. You want to look for any nose or bouquet. Now, the aroma is the general smell. So it might smell like a beer. It might smell like a cider. Whereas the bouquet is going to be more of a particular scent. The difference, the way I like to explain it, is aroma is it's going to smell like a red wine or it's going to smell like nail polish. A bouquet is it's going to smell like elements of raisins. It's going to elements of chocolate. And that's the big difference. And all of those beverages that we're going to be talking about tonight have both an aroma and a bouquet. Now, if it is a beer or if it is a cider with hops or a mead with hops, there's going to be a hop characteristic. There are hundreds of kinds of hops. A lot of them are more modern than the ones we're used to brewing with, and each one of those hops have a different taste to it. Some of them are citrusy, some of them are piney, some of them have more of that IPA taste, while some of them are a lot more mellow. Next is going to be the feel, which is good because I need to take a drink. And this is going to be the texture or the amount that you feel in your mouth. This is the reason why I wanted you guys to take all about the adjectives first, because I wanted you to get used to the adjectives rather than saying the body. You could say the texture in my mouth feels like. This texture in my mouth feels smooth. It's good. The finish, once again, it's a little thicker. It feels good though. And the finish is the aftertaste both in your mouth and in your neck. And then for those of you who like tannins or don't like tannins, I'm going to use the example of red wine. Most people either love or they hate red wine. And the thing that they either love or they hate is going to be the tannins. The tannin is going to be the thing that's going to pucker up. It's going to draw the moisture out of your mouth, and that's going to give you the tannins. If you're doing a red wine, you want that tannins. If you're doing some forms of mead, you want that tannin. If you're doing a beer, you really don't want that tannin. And then, of course, our favorite is taste. Now, this is where this class is one of the reasons I'm moving a little bit quicker, is because there are so many different taste elements, and it really is different if you're doing a beer, a cider, or a wine or / mead. Some of them, the regular ones, are the aftertaste. And that's going to be what you feel or what you taste in your throat after you finish drinking. And I'm not talking immediately after. I'm talking 30 seconds to a minute after, or sometimes 15 minutes, half an hour, an hour. I've had a drink at events before, and you go back an hour later and you're like, oh, I really want more. Or you've gone, ooh, I never want to have that again. The flavor is going to be the taste. I'm currently drinking a Licorice Mead, so I expect it to taste like licorice. I expect it to taste a little bit like honey. I really hate my screen. Sugar is the amount of sweetness or taste of the sweetening agent. The sugar alcohol balance. This one is really important, and all of them have it. Is if you have something that is very, very sweet, a lot of times it's not going to be overly alcoholic. That's because a lot of times it'll go ahead, that sweetness will ferment out. Now, there are sweeteners out there such as lactose and stuff like that that are non-fermentable. So you technically can have a very sweet stout that is high in alcohol. But you do want to try to get that balance where it doesn't necessarily be too alcoholic, where you're tasting like nail polish. I hate to use that expression, but we've all had the home brew that has tasted like nail polish or paint thinner or something like that. You want to get that nice balance in between there. Now, just because it's not sweet does not mean it's not bad. And that goes to our next one, which is the sweet dry balance. And I will definitely hit this part again here shortly. Sweet is good. Dry is good. Everyone has a varied of a palate. when you're judging or when you're looking at a brew, you're definitely going to want to go ahead and you're going to make sure that you're judging going by the type of the beverage, not your personal preference. I'm lucky in the fact that I love sweet wines. I love sweet meads. I also really love a good red wine. So I'm one of those few who enjoy the balance of those. Sweetness is the noticeability of the sugars. Now, I want you guys to think, if you've ever gone to an event and you've had someone give you mead and all it did is taste like sugar, or this happens a lot in cordials or liqueurs, is their sugar balance is off. And so the sweetness, you just feel like you're drinking white sugar, not necessarily honey, not brown sugar. It just feels like you're drinking sugar water. Taste is the different flavors that you perceive both in your mouth and in your throat. Go back. That's okay. Wait, go back. I really need that screen. Sorry. Screen share. Go back. Yes, share. Acid is a little bit more hard to explain, and it's because it's not what we would think of acid as in like the citric acid. It's more like a sourness, like when something has gone bad. It's more like an acid in an apple cider that has gone bad, where it just doesn't taste right. Believe it or not, you get this acid flavor the most in beers because something goes wrong. You either get a bacterial infection or something is just not right. And then, of course, my favorite, the tasting of the alcohol. I personally am a firm believer, unless you're trying to make moonshine, that you really shouldn't be able to detect the large amounts of alcohol. Now, with home brew, especially meads and wines that hit that higher alcohol level, there's a larger chance that you're going to get a little bit more of that alcohol flavor. You just want to make sure that alcohol flavor never goes more than the actual flavor of the drink. I'm going to go back to the one that I'm drinking as an example, which is my Licorice Mead. I want to make sure I can taste the honey. I want to make sure I can taste the licorice. If the alcohol content, and this was brewed by Malcolm, who was a heavy-handed brewer, so I know the alcohol content's about 17 to 18%. I also know he back-sweetened it. If I tasted that 18% alcohol more than the honey or the licorice, there would have been a problem. Now, for anyone who's had his Licorice Mead, you know you only taste the honey and the licorice and never have more than one glass because it is that tasty and you will feel it the next morning. Carbonation is the fizz, and that's going to be due to CO2, either the natural CO2 produced by the yeast or by forced carbonation, by bottling. And that sometimes you want carbonation, sometimes you don't. Most of the time, you do not want carbonation in a red wine unless you're purposely trying to get a nice red wine with a fizz. If you have a wine that's supposed to be fizzy, I mean, it's not supposed to be fizzy and it is fizzy, that means there's going to be a little bit of a problem. And then once again, this is another one. Yes, it's supposed to be on there twice, is the hop characteristics, because hops will do more than just taste. You can smell it and you can also taste it. And now I get to breathe. Okay, so go to the next one.
Hey, before you move on, V, so there was a question about sour beers just in relation to what you were talking about with acid.
Okay, so sour beers are going to be a little bit different. And it's going to go down to the individual brewer. And then part of it is going to go down to what they were planning or attempting to do. As someone who uses a natural bacteria in order to sour their beers, I know what that bacteria is going to be like. So I try to explain that to the judges that, hey, this is going to be a sour beer. It should have a taste like a sour raspberry. It should not have a taste like sour vinegar. If it has like a sour vinegar taste, I know it's going to be bad. I don't know if that totally answers the question. Mostly because sour beers are a little finicky. You should still, anytime you have a gose or a sour beer, all sour beers are goses, by the way, not all goses are sour. Anytime you have a gose, you want to make sure that whatever flavor you have, you can still taste it. If you're having a blood red orange sour and you can't taste that blood red orange and you only taste sour, that's not a good beer. Yeah, that's the best way I can explain it, is you want to make sure with that sourness, you want it to be there. And we'll get into that a little bit with the beverage to the type. I'm so going to use a sour as an example in the next class, just so you guys all know now. But like I said, you do want to make sure that there is that flavor profile of the other elements of the beer that they were trying to get. Now, some other kind of the definitions that are very particular to us, especially in the SCA, are going to be the presentation, the manner in which the beverage is displayed, as well as the documentation. And we're going to totally get into that next class. That actually has a lot to do with it. I think I will go ahead probably tomorrow is I'll create a PDF of this PowerPoint, and I'll throw it up on the Drunken Duck Facebook page because I love this chart. I made this chart today during lunch, and it kind of gives you an idea, such as like in the head quality, you don't want to look for it in wine and cider. There's no reason to look for it. It's not going to be there. You're not going to judge on it. Just like unless they're making a hopped cider, you're not going to look for the hop characteristic in a cider. If you have tannins in beer, once again, like I said earlier, that would be bad. That's an indicator. You don't want to judge. You don't want to go looking for, oh, these are really great tannins in this ale. No, if there's tannins in an ale or a lager, there's probably a problem somewhere. Now I kind of want to make a tannined beer just to see if I can prove myself wrong.
I would say on your tannins, ciders can and sometimes do have tannin.
That is correct. I'll fix that tomorrow before I post this. Yes, ciders do have tannins, and meads will definitely have tannins. They're just not as numerous as they would in wines.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so this kind of breaks down a little bit of what you're looking for when it comes to the beer. You are looking at the aroma. You are looking at the appearance, the flavor, the mouthfeel, the characteristic ingredients, and we'll get to that in 1 second. But for anyone who took the previous class, hopefully this looks familiar. And if you didn't, go back, watch the other YouTube video because it'll make a lot more sense. Some of the other things, and I'm going to start mentioning this now, is that there are some very particular things that should be applied to particular beverages. And it's going to be the OG, the IBUs, the FGs, SRMs, and ABVs. I went ahead and I broke what those stand for down there, but I do want to hit on it real quick. If you're a brewer, you know what the original gravity is. That is what your sugar content is before you put the yeast in there. Hold on 1 second. IBUs is the International Bitter Unit. And the day I learned that at going into a microbrewery was the day I was so very happy because I could go, I really want a hopped beer. So I looked for something that had the most amount of IBUs I can. On days where I don't want a hopped beer, I look for something that has very low IBUs. I am starting to ask my brewers that are more experienced, like Dye, and a few others who really know their beers, to start putting the IBUs on there because it's kind of fun. FG is your final gravity. And what you do is you take your original gravity and your final gravity, and the final gravity is how much sugar is left after all the yeasts went to go eat your sugars. And what that will give you is that will give your alcohol, your ABV, alcohol by volume. And hopefully we all know what that is. That's how much alcohol is in that liquid per percentage. So it's 6.8% for a beer. It's going to be 15% for a mead, 7% for a cider. And then for beers only is the SRMs, and that's the standard reference method. And if you're not a beer brewer, you're like, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know how they got that name. SRMs is the color of the beer. So if you're brewing a stout, unless you're brewing a blonde stout, that stout better be dark. If you are brewing a blonde ale and it comes out black, that means your SRM is completely wrong. And you're going to lose points on that, because even though your beer is absolutely beautiful, you can see through it. If you're making a blonde beer and that beer is black, that means you're not making a blonde beer. That means you're making something else. And that's kind of a fun thing to start to play with. And they have a little chart, and I'll see if I can find one and I'll throw that up, or I'll make one for you guys. So that's when it comes to beer. Now, wines and meads, I always put those together because they're very, very similar, though they're not. You're going to look at a lot of the same things: the appearance, the aroma, the flavor, the mouthfeel, and the overall impressions. However, whereas the other one, you had to look at the gravity, the alcohol content, and stuff like that. When it comes to wines and meads, you're going to focus more on the sweetness, the carbonation level, if it is not there, and if it's supposed to be there. If you're making a champagne and there's no carbonation, you are not making a champagne. The strength, if you are making an apple wine and it comes in at 5.5%, you are not making an apple wine. You're making an apple cider. It might taste lovely. It might be perfect. It's just not an apple wine. And then the honey variety, if that's important to your mead, or the grape variety, if that is important to your wine. You can also throw in a fruit variety if you're making something like a blackberry wine and apple wine, stuff like that. And then when it comes to cider, is kind of you take beer and wine and they had a child, and that gives you cider. It's going to be using a lot of the, I see Oswin's head shaking and it's cracking me up.
Sorry. I make a lot of ciders. I like this scene.
Nope, you're good. It's going to have a lot of the same things. So it's going to have the fruit flavors of an apple, hopefully, or of whatever fruit you used, as well as undertones. Undertones are the things that are more the bouquet. It's going to have elements of lemongrass. It's going to have elements of chamomile or ginger, things that are not that first apple or fruit flavor right on your taste. And then when it comes to cider, they go from everywhere from dry, which is not sweet, all the way to sweet. And I don't understand why they use dry. I would have just said it's not sweet, but we use the term dry because it sounds more elegant. So it goes everything from dry to sweet. Ignore the acidity underneath the sweet. That was a typo. But we do want to look at the acidity by itself. And this goes to is it like drinking vinegar? Or is it like drinking apple juice? It should not be either of those. It should be halfway in the middle. Some ciders are going to have a little bit more of that acid bite, that tang to it, where others are going to be a little bit more mellow. And it's kind of going to depend on that style of cider that you're going to drink. Appearance, can you see through it? Is there carbonation? For the most part, you want your ciders to be carbonated. Now there's different levels of carbonation before Oswin hurts me. Some of them are going to be a lot more carbonated than others. None of them are really going to get the carbonation on them, so they have like a head of a beer. But you do want to have a little bit of that carbonation, and then how it feels in your mouth. So that's going to be the body and the fullness. Now, this is going to be a great time. The importance of taste appropriate to type. I mentioned this very briefly last time. The first class was really focused on coming up with the creative adjectives. I'm going to explain here in a second why that was so important. This class then takes those adjectives to better explain whatever you're drinking in the area where it's supposed to be judged. Now, with that being said, I will keep on repeating this until I can get everyone in the known world to understand that there is a difference between this is a good brew and this is something I like. There is a difference between this is a bad brew and I do not like this style of brew. I'm going to keep on repeating that. If someone doesn't understand what that means, let me know and I'll explain it. Basically, just because you don't enjoy a style doesn't mean it's not the perfect example of the style. I don't like sours anymore. I've been over soured out. I've had too many bad ones. I could judge a good one, but I don't like sours. And so I have to be very careful when I judge sours now to make sure, is it just because I don't enjoy drinking it, or is it a bad example of a sour? I have a wonderful example that I'm going to show you guys here in class. For my beverage that I brought, no, it wasn't just the mead, I have a double chocolate stout by Young's because it's been a really long week and I deserve it. That's the only reason I can say why I have that. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to stop sharing this for a little bit. I'm going to keep on talking and I'm going to open this in front of you guys and hopefully not spill it on my cat is going to be the goal. And this is explaining to you guys why the last class mattered so much. I'm going to go ahead. I'm not going to pour the entire thing because it's a big thing, that is a great sound. I don't know if you guys heard it.
Yep, you can hear it.
So I'm going to pour a little bit so you guys can see it.
Great sound.
I know.
I'm a little jealous right now, I got to admit.
I really deserve this beer. That's all I'm saying. And I actually got this for free. I went to go pull through and I drive through liquor store and I was like, ooh, how much is that? And I'd already was getting the 6-pack I was getting. He's like, oh, it's only $10. Like, all right, I'll get it next time. He's like, have you ever had it? And I was like, yeah, it's one of my favorite beers. And he's like, well, here, I'll split the 4-pack with you. Oh, okay. And so he purchased it because he'd never had it before. And I got 2 cans and he got 2 cans. So I was very excited. I love my drive-through liquor store. They're fabulous. So we're going to describe Young's double chocolate stout right now. First of all, for you guys, I want to make sure that you guys can actually see this. What does the head look like? Can you see the head there?
Yep, we can see it. I'd say you got about 1/2 inch ahead there, maybe. Well, maybe a quarter. Yep. Okay. And
it's staying. It's not going down. It's staying there. The color, I would say, is creamy and dark and chocolatey. I'm going to smell it. It smells like chocolate and coffee, my 2 favorite things, and beer. Now it's my 3 favorite things. All right. So it has the aroma of coffee and chocolate, no hops. It looks velvety. It looks luscious and creamy and has a beautiful head that is just staying there. I can say something really just horrible right now. I love explaining the heads of beer because you just can use some really great, wonderful double entendres. And I hope people do because then it makes people smile and they enjoy drinking their beers. When you drink it, it's sweet. I can taste the chocolate. I can taste the coffee. No hops whatsoever. And it's not the thickest mouthfeel for a stout, but it's still really good. It has a really low carbonation, which is a little weird. I think it's because it was probably an older can. It's not bubbly, and stouts aren't supposed to be overly carbonated. But it's really... My cat needs to stop playing. My cat wants the thing as well. So now I'm going to go back and I'm going to share my screen again because I'm going to make you guys all dizzy from sharing my screen. I'm lucky enough that I've had Young's double chocolate stout before, and so I know what it tastes like. Also, some of these adjectives I went ahead and I pulled off of Untapped to get other people's opinions. If you're not on Untapped and you are a beer drinker, I highly recommend it. And also come find me. I'm the Drunken Duck. So now I'm going to go and I'm going to look at what this is supposed to taste like per the style. So if I go to this one, the Young's Double Chocolate Stout is a dark British beer and it's a sweet stout. So these are some of, in order to be classified as a really good stout, a sweet stout, it should be dark and sweet and roasty and sweetened espresso and coffee and cream. And these are all the things that we used in our adjectives prior to us ever opening up what the type of style should be. It has a medium full to full bodied mouthfeel. This one has, I would say, more the medium to full, doesn't have the full body. It is definitely creamy. It has the low carbonation, high residual sugar. It has, I'll now look at my can and make sure alcohol is 5.2. Let's see, it definitely falls between the ABVs of 4 and 6%, so it's definitely there. Does it have, for the SRMs, 30 to 40 is going to be fairly dark. This is, in fact, a fairly dark beer. Now, I don't have an idea of the IBUs or the final gravity because I didn't brew this, and this was not a home brew. Though I bet if I contacted them, I could probably find it out. The joy of doing the last class where you go through and you get those adjectives before you jump into looking at the type is I'm not going to go to this and say, oh yeah, it has that, check, it has that, it has this, it has this. No, I created my own opinion beforehand. I knew it was dark and sweet and roasty. I had all of those adjectives for when I could then go ahead and I can pull what I was going to go ahead and critique this on. I could see if it was going to hit all of those areas. Now, I'm going to throw one of my best friends underneath the bus. Now, I did warn him beforehand that I was potentially throwing him underneath the bus, but I didn't tell him why. So, Oswin, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and hopefully they can see you as well. And I want you to
take you off spotlight. That'll help.
Ooh, I'm on a spotlight.
Yeah. How do I do that? Replace spotlight. There we go.
Here we go. Okay, describe your cider.
All right, so this is Aspal. You can't see it because it's fading in the background. This is Aspal. This is an English cider from Suffolk. So I already have an idea of what it's one of my favorites, so I already know what it's supposed to taste like. But even with that descriptor, I have an idea. East English ciders are sweet. West English ciders are dry. So this I'm expecting should be kind of in the middle. ASPALL for Kamara in there. So again, it's fading in my background, but I take a look at it. It's got a very nice yellow, light yellow color. There's a good amount of carbonation in there. So those are all very good qualities. The nose, you get a bit of, and I know you hate just the word floral because I have no idea what flower it smells like, but it does have a florally smell to it. It also has an appley smell to it, so you kind of a balance there. It doesn't smell like a rose, but it doesn't just smell like a fresh apple. There's a good balance in there. So let's take a look. I should have got a bigger glass to do legs. But it's a cider I'm not expecting much in the way of legs, and I'm not seeing much in the way of legs. So that's again, knowing that it's on the dry side, I'm not expecting a lot of sugar. That's why I'm not expecting to see much in the way of legs. All right, so now to taste. So it goes down very smooth. It's got a very light appley flavor. I couldn't tell you what variety of apple. It's certainly not. It's not like one of your big sweet eaty apples, but it has more of a tart apple flavor, which is what I would have expected. Little bit of sweetness there, but not a lot. And we've been joined by Master Dougal. Hi, Dougal. And so let's take the second sip. And we linger over that. Not much of an aftertaste. I mean, it does fill your mouth with apple. You're expecting that with an apple cider. So those are the adjectives I have for just my doing of it. Now, fortunately, they also tell you on the back of the bottle what you should be expecting. Appearance, mild straw, mid straw. I would say that's right. It had a very light yellow coloring to it. Aroma, floral, that can mean anything, but I agreed with that. Taste, crisp apple. Sure. I was good with that. Knowing this is a Suffolk brewed cider, again, I was expecting a dry. I like dry ciders. I like my West Country ciders. So when we were talking about tannins, that's where a lot of that dryness is coming from. I can just feel like my insides of my cheeks kind of sinking in a little bit when I drink it. You get that little pucker, and I go, yeah, that's nice. That's satisfying the thirst there. So that's my opinion, and the good folk at Aspal seem to agree.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen again.
I'll put you back on Spotlight.
I like being on the spotlight. Can I vogue again? Do. Okay. The host had spotlighted your video for everyone. Okay, so those are his adjectives. He didn't know I was going to ask beforehand. I just told him I was going to throw him under the bus. So, but I did ask him what he was going to be drinking tonight. Mm-hmm. And so he told me it was going to be an English cider. So going off of this, these are some of the things that would actually hit for an English cider. Dry is the most traditional. He went ahead and he said it was definitely, he likes the drier ones. Would you say, and there's the dry again, would you say that it was full bodied?
Yeah, seeing these adjectives, I definitely wouldn't call it a steer. I'm not really sure about the full body. I definitely will give it the complex flavor. Don't get me wrong, I like my American ciders too. But American ciders often seem very one note. Whereas English ciders, and I can go on for hours as to why that is, do have a more complex flavor. So definitely like that. The no overt apple character. Yeah, I mean, it was there. It was clearly apple, but it was not.
But you mentioned
here's in your face apple, right?
Yep. So these are medium yellow. You definitely said right there for the color on the appearance that it was yellow. You mentioned the puckering of the tannins a few times, so that was definitely there. You said it was definitely the moderate on the carbonation.
Yeah.
So it was there.
Yep.
What was the alcohol percentage?
Oh yeah, that should be on here too somewhere. 6.8.
All right, so it's right in between that 6 to 9%. Now, this is the whole reason. Now, he hadn't seen this slide beforehand. He didn't know I was going to show him this slide at all whatsoever. But he could now go and he can say, because he wrote down all of his adjectives beforehand, hey, look it, these are what I tasted. These were my flavors. Now, I actually go ahead and I keep all of these broken down for the different types, and I mentioned them last class. And I definitely put the links again where you can find the different types in there. I loved it when beforehand they would always tell us what we were going to judge, so I could print those off beforehand. I actually just keep a PDF on my phone now. It makes it a whole lot easier. So that way I go in, I'll do the initial taste tests that we talked about last time, about going through the whole procedure of tasting it, smelling it, feeling it, writing all of my opinions down, the adjectives. And then last class I mentioned, you go through, you read the documentation, and you look at the type. And that's what we're talking about here. And when we get into the next class where we go through the particulars for the Division 5, I'll go ahead and I'll show you where those go ahead and line up with what we're doing today. It all kind of builds on each other. And it's why I was kind of emphasizing so many people to go and try and get as many adjectives as they could. And it's so great, even with your own brews, go ahead and try to get those adjectives out there so you can say, yes, this is tasting this way, this is tasting that way. And then you can go and you can pull the information on the types and everything like that, and you can go, oh heck, I just made a Hefeweizen that tastes like a sour. Maybe this isn't right. This is one of the reasons why I kind of emphasize so many homebrewers to start taste testing their own brews like this. Not only will it prepare you later on if you ever want to judge, it just makes you a better brewer, even if you don't ever want to enter a competition. So I kind of hit on this one earlier. It was what I was drinking. Technically, a licorice mead would go down as a spiced mead. Sorry, that was my cat, not me. She's very persistent. And I kind of hit some of those. The main thing I want, because there's a whole lot to read, and like I said, I'll make this PDF available later, that the spices should be well incorporated into the mead, that there should be a nice balance. I'm not drinking licorice. I'm not drinking mead. I'm drinking a licorice mead. And that is that main sentence right up there on the top. And that was one of the things that I would go ahead and I would look through. One of the things I do want to go ahead and talk about before we run out of time is when you get to adjectives, some of the times, and this is a big thing in both any sort of brewing competitions, they'll talk about absence of off odors, or do you want there to be an absence of off odors. If you have an off flavor or a nose or a smell, there's a potential, I'm going to use the word potential, that something is wrong. Now, there is also a huge likelihood if you have banana smelling in your beer, it could be a Hefeweizen, and it's supposed to be there. So not all of these are bad, depending on the type. And that's why I wanted to bring this up after we talked about the difference of judging to the type, so that way you kind of know going on these. Now, these are some of the ones that get used a lot. If something tastes grassy, it could have the acetaldehyde in it. If it's spicy, and not in a good way, because there are some good spicy like beverages out there that are intending to be spicy. But if it is hot and it is burning your throat and you feel like you just like did a shot of 151 and this is a homebrew, there's probably, that would be an off flavor. Same thing if you are doing something that's supposed to be a sweet mead and all of a sudden your cheeks are puckering and it has way too much tannin in it, that would be considered an off flavor, which is why I kind of put some of these in there. Buttery happens to be my favorite one, only because you never expect a drink to be considered buttery. Normally, buttery is not a good thing in a beverage. That is one of those things that normally tell you that there was probably an infection or something went wrong or something didn't hit the alcohol numbers. Unless you're trying to go for like a buttered popcorn. I'm trying to think of what would go really well with buttered popcorn. Buttered popcorn porter or a peanut butter porter has a tendency to occasionally be a little bit buttery, stuff like that. Sometimes you might be going for that grassy flavor. And if you are going for a grassy flavor, put that in your descriptions. when you enter, and we'll talk about that a little bit next time too, of being able to put your best brew forward, how to describe it so they know that you were purposely trying to get something that was tasting a little bit more green. Maybe you use lemongrass or did something and play with it to give it that grassy flavor. Otherwise, there are some times that grassy can be considered an off flavor. If you ever get a rotten egg in a beverage, don't drink it. Just don't drink it. That definitely tells you that something is off. But these are also one of the reasons why, going to the last class, trying to get you to use more of those adjectives, because these are a lot of the adjectives that people use quite often in judging criteria of different brewing competitions all over the world. So I know Dougal will recognize some of these. Like I mentioned last time, BJCP, their docs are fabulous. If you're like me and you like PDFs and have them on your phone, that's great. They also offer them in Excel formula, different ways, but these are going to give you the most basic general types of beverages that we use a lot. And we're going to go ahead and we'll look at the actual types in the mid-realm specific in the next class. If you want copies of this PowerPoint, like I said, probably tomorrow or if the next day, make sure you follow the Drunken Duck so we can make sure we can get that up there, as well as all of the little charts and stuff that I made for this. We'll go through, and I'll probably, Oswin, can I send them to you to attach as well?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
We'll put them in the room, Google Drive, and attach to the event.
Awesome. I spoke really quickly, so I actually made it underneath the hour this time. But you guys have homework. Sorry. I want you to drink. Keep drinking. I want you to try any 3 beverages, and they can be, like Oswin did tonight, a beverage he knows and he loves. It can be any 3 beverages. They should be different. And just go ahead and write down your descriptive adjectives of the beverage, and then I want you to go ahead and check out the beverage type on one of those links that I go ahead and I mentioned beforehand. So that way kind of gives you an idea of, I'm drinking this, I love this, I know this, these are my adjectives. Does this beer fit into those types? And this will just kind of get you a little bit more used to going ahead and getting into that judging mindset. And then, of course, next Tuesday is a shot at Division 5, brewing in A&S. And hopefully you guys will join me, especially for those of you who have stuck around from the very first one all the way to that one. And I'm also going to do a real quick plug on mid-realm brewers. We are doing a whole slew of competitions. Some of them are brewing, some of them are brewing related. Please, if you're a brewer, take part. And now that you're getting used to more of the whole judging idea, we would love more judges. We actually had a problem this year where in the last one, we didn't have enough judges up here in our area because I couldn't judge. So if you're interested in judging that, please join the Mid-Realm Brewers. And I think that is it for this class. Were there any additional questions in the 2 minutes that we have left? And now I can finally breathe.
We can go long. It's not a problem.
I know. I just felt bad for going so long last class. Are we good? We're good? I'm going to stop.
Not seeing any questions, V.
Sweet. So if anyone has any additional questions, anything like that, feel free. Go ahead and message me. I think that's it.
All right. Well, in the absence of questions, which that looks to be the case, I'm going to, oh, Percival raised his hand for a second.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Okay. This is my first attempt at a cider.
Gallery view. There we go.
Well done.
It's pretty.
It is pretty.
It's very, very pretty. I'm very proud of it, pretty-wise.
Looks good.
It is so painfully dry.
Okay. Okay.
So I'm going to ask a couple of questions real quick. Other than the dryness, what does it taste like?
It's got a good fruit flavor. You can taste the apples through it. I can taste the malic acid. The yeast did keep the malic acid taste. I used the cider yeast.
Okay.
That it just came in that little green packet.
Safe cider.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the little green packet. I don't like
Big
it.
stuff.
It went too far. I started this at a fairly high specific gravity and was really expecting it to stop at about 5%. It's closer to 8.
Yeah.
It went. Now, granted, this was earlier this fall in Texas, if there is such a thing as fall in Texas, South Texas. I'm actually missing out on the best brewing temperatures. I haven't got anything in the fermenters right now. I've been kind of being a slug.
So you said you came in around 8% when it was all done, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so Safe Cider is one of those really good ones for the fact that it has wonderful hot, it's very forgiving. If the house gets too cold, if it gets too hot, it's one of those ones that has that nice range of temperature. It also has a very wonderful, well-designed lab-oriented yeast that is very strong and will try to keep other bacteria out and stuff like that. So it's wonderful for new brewers. Here's the problem. You're not necessarily a new brewer. It has an alcohol tolerance of 16%.
Holy crap!
Yeah. So for those who don't know, what an alcohol tolerance is in a yeast is, and each yeast is a little bit different. It's how much the alcohol has to get to in a brew in order to kill that yeast off. One of the reasons I love starting with Nottingham yeast with a lot of my new brewers when they're doing ciders and stuff like that is it has a relatively low alcohol tolerance. It has like 7.5%. So
that's what I use for my root beer.
And that's what I use for my root beer, my ginger beer, all of that, because I know no matter what, it's not going to get above that level. Now, if you had a really high initial gravity and you go ahead and you put that yeast in and you were probably safe, and you said you had the warmer temperatures, it's going to go ahead and it's going to keep on brewing as long as it has sugar and wonderful nutrients to eat until it hits that 16%.
Yeah, I'm kind of glad I didn't try to back sweeten it now that you're telling me that, because I would have had grenades in the bottle.
Yes, you would have. Now, you do have a couple of choices. First of all, if it is nice and dry and it has a wonderful apple flavor, that's not a bad thing, because there's lots of people out there who love dry ciders, especially if they have a great apple. Yeah.
It's Angry Orchard, which is a little bit on the dry side for me.
I was going to say, what do you enjoy drinking? Because I always tell brewers to brew to their palates. So if you like something sweeter, there are things that you can do to be able to kill off that alcohol so you can back sweeten it. So there are definitely steps that you can take that will not create bombs or anything like that. Now, I'm assuming that you bottled all of it already, right?
Yep, I did. And I could go through and put Camden tabs in. I didn't get a whole lot of carbonation. I got a very small amount of carbonation. It's nice, and when I cold crashed it, it's beautiful.
It is pretty. It is very pretty.
It's the local grocery store's apple juice that I made sure to look in where the apple juice was sourced from. This all came from Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
Sweet.
Go ahead.
I challenge you to do a small batch of that again, using the yeast and everything like that, but go ahead and kill off the brew prior to bottling it, and then go ahead and back sweeten it and see if you get something that you like a little bit better, especially if you got the flavors that you liked from that yeast.
I have Camden tabs. I'm not real fond of them.
Okay. Message me afterwards because I also have a whole handout on how to kill your yeast naturally.
I can cold crash like nobody's business.
The only problem with cold crashing is you just want to make sure that it doesn't come back. I've had that happen once. It was in a pumpkin mead, and no matter what I did, I couldn't kill the yeast. I actually had to boil it in order to kill the yeast, in order to back sweeten it. That was the first.
Okay, crazy question for you. I'm for those of you that don't know me, hi, I'm Percival. I'm originally from Callantyre, one of Cormac's squires, and therefore one of Master Gerald Goodwine's squire brother. He taught me how to brew. So it's kind of a linky story, but I'm very good at meads. Very, very good at meads.
I've had your meads. They're fabulous.
You really have. Honestly.
The juice came from Callantyre, but we'll catch up on that later. Keep going. Sorry.
Oh, I didn't know that my meads had made it that far. Hooray! Okay. But I use almost exclusively 71B.
Okay.
For the meads. I've got some D47. I'm hesitant to use because I've had such good luck with 71B. But is there any other yeasts that people like? Because I'm real happy with my technique. And I came from a beer brewing roots, so I use Irish moss to clarify.
Nice.
And that's why my meads are always so pretty.
I like pretty meads. It kind of depends on what flavors you're wanting to go for. And I have the only yeasts that I'm addicted to are the ones that I use for my new brewers in classes, which is the Nottingham. And when I use my yeasts for my quick meads, because I got that recipe from Master David from Callantyre, and it works fabulous. And I'm a firm believer, if something works wonderfully, don't change it. So if the ones that you are using are working really well, don't change it unless you go ahead and you play around it in small batches. I know like Oswin's doing an experiment right now with a couple of ciders where he did 5 or 6 different ciders and each one has a different yeast in there, more to get people to taste test better than it is to figure out which one he likes to use, because he already has the one that he likes to use. But I've done that before too, where I've done small experiments where I've taken, once I had a recipe, and you have your recipe that you love and it has worked great for you, now do that recipe up in the 5-gallon increments or however much you normally do it, and then break it up into either 5 1-gallon tests and use 5 different yeasts, or even do half gallons and do 10 different yeasts, and see if you like any better, or if the yeast that you are using works really great for you. Now, the added bonus to this is it's also going to go ahead and Oswin says he has 11 different yeasts and he doesn't have a favorite yet. When you share those, that creates really great class workshops for other people, because it not only gets them into more of the tasting, but it also shares your personal experience with how those yeasts work and everything like that. I think I did a similar experiment with mead, and one of them I used was the champagne yeast in order to give everyone that they needed to stop using champagne yeast in their meads. So
I made my first batch with champagne yeast and got lucky. It only went to 11. But
everyone most uses champagne yeast for their first batch of mead, myself included.
It went to 11.
Yeah. I got a wonderful high octane, and I think it's now been sitting for 10 years and it might be drinkable about now. We'll see. We'll open some up. But I love talking brewing. I love answering questions. And I'm going to go ahead and close this because being in the agricultural field, I had to be up at 5 o'clock in the morning. But if anyone else has any
Ooh.
questions, message me, chat me, email me. Best way is through the Facebook page, Drunken Duck. If I don't answer it, Oswin answers it, which is fabulous. So if you have cider questions, you can ask him too. I would have to actually say, I think he's better at cider than I am at this point.
Aw.
So with that, I think we're good for the evening. And honestly, I hope to see all of you guys next Tuesday for class so we can hit the horrible nitty gritty of Division 5 and come out with a million fabulous new judges to be able to judge all of our brewing entries that we are all going to have because everyone has started brewing during lockdown. So yay for homebrew. And I think that's it. I think we're good.
All right. On that, I'm going to end the meeting. It's going to kick all of you out. It's nothing personal. It's just the way the system works. So thank you all, and see you later.